My girlfriend started drawing as a form of trauma therapy. Ever since Evelyn had come back, she had gotten adjusted to very strange ways of doing things. There were a number of particular steps she would go through before conducting the most mundane tasks. The ones we all run with our very own autopilot, but hers seemed entirely out of sync. There were many different things she did with the rules she had come up with herself. To give you only one example, if Evelyn wanted to go to the grocery store, and she went there every day, there were 4 steps before leaving home. There were more for the way there, but let's start with these first. Step 1, she would say out loud, to me or maybe to herself, I wasn't sure. Step 1 is to get dressed properly. A sundress like the one I am wearing right now is perfectly fine. However, we need to be prepared for whatever the sky might surprise us with. For that reason, we wear a raincoat, a little sweat won't kill us. And we need an umbrella too, of course. She put on the yellow raincoat and made sure the umbrella was leaning on the door so she definitely wouldn't forget to grab it. Step 2. Preparation comes in many ways, and we always need to know precisely what we need. She held up the list of grocery items she had prepared before. It had to be written on a checked paper with a pencil. Step 3. The grocery bag must always contain one item already. One that is edible and that we bought before. She shook the tote bag, but there was no sound. So she proceeded to open it slightly so we both saw the lemon that was inside. She nodded at me and I reciprocated by raising my eyebrows. Step 4. We only pay with coins. I interrupted her and handed over the small wool bag that she had sewed herself. It has become my routine to go to the bank almost every other day to exchange banknotes for coins. Evelyn smiled. A genuine one, not the one she had been giving me for the last 12 days. It was 12 days ago that she had appeared back on our doorstep. And it was 24 days ago that she had gone to the gym and disappeared without a trace. Not a letter, not a text or a call. Not to me or anyone else that she knew. She simply vanished. I called the police the very same night, but they couldn't do anything yet. She was an adult after all. When there still was no trace of my girlfriend the following days, they started a search troop. Of course, I had alarmed everyone I knew, posted on all sorts of social media that I otherwise hardly ever used, hung up posters. Some said that she had just left me, but I didn't believe that. People don't go away without packing a single item. Even her passport was still in the closet. Others were mumbling that if she hadn't come back by now, chances were high that she certainly must be dead. They didn't say it to my face, but I knew. And so after nights and nights of horror and fear and sadness, I nearly had a heart attack when I saw her suddenly standing on our doorstep. Her normally long, curly hair was trimmed to shoulder length. She was wearing the clothes of the day she had gone missing, but they didn't look a bit dirty. And her smile was still exactly the same. That toothpaste smile that I had been thinking about every single day. 1 second later, she was jumping into my arms. I asked her what happened. The police interrogated her. Everyone was curious. She would just shrug and say that she didn't remember, but that she was feeling perfectly fine. Nothing bad could have happened because she didn't feel bad. Of course, that was bullshit. I'm not saying that she was lying. I would never say that, even if I almost lost my cool a couple of times. This whole mess was destroying me as well. But I still don't think she was lying. No, I believe something so entirely horrific happened to her that her mind chose to forget. You see, I love Evelyn and I don't mind her newfound routines. When people gave her weird looks for wearing a raincoat on what felt like the hottest day of the year, I went and bought a matching one so that at least they would whisper about both of us. When the cashier rolled their eyes at the sight of all the coins, I'd take the bag with a smile and proceed to carefully choose each one before handing it over. I bought multiple umbrellas, just in case. I have no idea why, but it somehow seemed to help her. It helped her forget about whatever she went through. After 6 days, she even started sleeping in bed with me again. Before that, she couldn't stand the thought of not being alone at night, and flinched each time I even tried to touch her. After our first hug, physical contact had become close to none. I was getting used to our new regular quite quickly, but the therapist disagreed when it came to my theory of Evelyn coping by going through steps for everything. That's when he suggested art therapy. A way for her brain to communicate differently. You see, the left hemisphere of our brain is generally in charge of logical thinking and language production. The right hemisphere is in charge of emotions and creativity. Now the distinction often isn't that important as they are both connected by the corpus callosum. The bridge between both sides, so to say. Without the connection, we wouldn't be able to draw a picture of a word someone gives us. Now because they are connected, this usually is no problem. However, there is a theory that there seems to be a failure in connection, in communication. Have you ever felt incredibly sad but simply didn't know the reason why? Possibly the left hemisphere simply couldn't form the words for you to understand. Now it was very far-fetched, but we were desperate to find any solution to the case of Evelyn, and that's when the idea of art therapy came up. Maybe Evelyn couldn't find the words for what happened, but draw them instead. I went and bought art supplies that same day, and while I thought she might be reluctant at first, she gave me a bright smile when she saw the empty canvases, the brushes, and all the different acrylic colors. Are there steps for drawing as well? I asked. She tilted her head. That depends. Do you want to join me? No, let this be your hobby. I might play some music in the meantime. She nodded as if I had given precisely the right answer. Then we shall keep the steps to ourselves. I was prepared for the worst. The past weeks had been massively nerve-wracking for me as well, though I didn't want to imagine what kind of hell poor Evelyn had gone through that got her this fucked up. There was one thought that kept coming back to me. There was one that seemed rather obvious due to the way she was acting, but I didn't feel proven in my theory until I saw her paintings. She kept them secret at first. I'm not ready for you to see yet. It took me all the self-control I had not to go inside the small office room she was using as her new atelier, but I stayed patient. I stayed patient, nervously waiting for the horrors I might look at. Well, I tried. I really did. Everyone loses control sometimes, don't they? I'm not proud to admit that I didn't stay the patient boyfriend for long. When Evelyn went through the steps of planting a new flower in the garden, I told her I was going to take a nap. Instead, I walked into the office. It was strange. I felt like an intruder in my own home, and somehow, I was, but I really thought that I needed to help her. That she was overwhelmed by the things she drew and was scared to show me. Needless to say, I expected anything but the paintings I found. They were beautiful. Not only the technique she used, Evelyn had always been more of the creative kind, but with the drawings, it wasn't only the style. No, the objects were beautiful as well. Fields in 3 shades of green with a baby blue sky and not a single cloud. A lake crystal clear that it almost appeared real. Hills in perfect shape, one only slightly bigger than the next. I sighed. On one hand, I was relieved not to see blood, dead bodies, maybe the face of a murderer. But at the same time, I felt disappointed. I wished deep inside that this would somehow help us solve the puzzle. You've been naughty. I jumped at the voice of Evelyn behind me. She spoke in such a shrill voice that I thought she was furious, but when I turned around, she simply looked like an angry child with her arms crossed in front of her chest. You made a promise, Nick. I opened my mouth but didn't know what to say. I should have apologized, but instead, I said I thought maybe you drew the place you went to. Well, silly. I did. That is the grass I was lying in. I watched the clouds, but they were gone right away. There was no sun, but we didn't mind. We? I asked. No, me. You weren't there. I sighed. Ev, you're making no sense. You weren't lying in the grass for 3 weeks. You were gone. I thought you were dead, kidnapped, or whatever. I couldn't hold it in anymore and hated myself seconds later for raising my voice, but she seemed unbothered. She only shrugged. That's where I was. Believe me or not. I told you I was fine. She turned around, but I grabbed her arm before she could leave. Was it a cult? The ones that took you? No? The ones you were with? You can tell me, I won't judge. She shook her head. No. I didn't get anything else out of here that evening. Or the next, but I did continue to follow her routines even more. I took part in them as a way to understand her situation better, and somehow it really did seem to help. She trusted me more and more each day, and I could feel that she was starting to open up. This is why I was completely thrown off by the next drawing she made. This one she didn't hide. No, she hung it right in our living room. It was the same green field, except for this time there was a person in the middle of it. It looked just like me, hyper-realistic. She was talented for sure, but this skill was definitely new. The person looked exactly like me, but something was different. I had no nose and no mouth. And the eyes, my very own eyes, were piercing through me. That image of me sent the coldest shiver down my spine. When I asked Evelyn about it, she said that it wasn't me, but that I didn't need to worry. He didn't need the nose or the mouth, or ears for that matter. Nobody would hear him scream. At that moment, I'm not sure if it was progress or a setback, but I believed that I was getting just a little closer to figuring out what happened. At least I thought I did. And I needed her to tell or show more, so I made sure Evelyn would be comfortable and keep drawing. One day, she was so sucked into a new painting that she was working at, that I suggested getting groceries on my own. She was reluctant. At first. But then I verbally went through the steps. Got my raincoat, umbrella, the bag with an apple inside, coins, and I will write a list. All right, I trust you, honey. Just one moment, yes. She kept scribbling while looking up after every word she wrote. Then she handed it over. Do everything as always, yes? I nodded. Of course. I made my way to the store with those damn loud coins and the raincoat that was far too hot, but I had promised it and I intended to keep it. Until I was finally at the store and got the list out that Evelyn had written. 200 milliliters, don't listen. 3 pieces to a word I say. 500 grams, do not follow. 1 liter, the steps will trap you. 2 jars, don't let Evelyn know. The first 2 words were all written in cursive. But the others weren't. There is an intruder in my home. She looks exactly like the woman who lived here. The one that I loved deeply and never wanted to lose. She looks exactly like her, but she's not. No, this one seems hollow on the inside, which sounds ironic because I believe there are actually 2 different people in her body. The new Evelyn, the one that laid in the Play-Doh green grass, blissfully watching a sky with no clouds and no sun. The one that goes through a specific number of steps whenever she wants to do something. The one that scares the shit out of me with her paintings of a version of me that can't speak or scream. And then there is the Evelyn that I love and that loves me. The one who wants to protect me and help me. Unfortunately, the odd one seems to be in charge. Evelyn was dissociating from herself, which isn't something entirely surprising after a traumatic experience. Her childhood wasn't exactly happy and colorful either. To be honest, her parents plain out sucked. They hardly gave a shit when she went missing either. With my family living in a different country, we were pretty much each other's family. And I care. Yes, that explanation seemed perfectly logical. Maybe her therapist couldn't help her enough, maybe she needed to spend some time in a mental institution. Yes, perfectly logical conclusions to the note she gave me. Except, I wasn't thinking logically. I knew deep inside that something had happened to her the days that she was gone. I was certain that she went to that place that looked so nice and clean but couldn't have been. I knew that a person, with whatever mental challenges they are fighting, could not draw that person I saw in the painting. No, there was something else going on. Something unexplainable, but I'd get to the bottom of it. I would not have them take her away from me again by showing anyone that note. You might wonder if I am completely moronic, losing my mind and risking my life, but I hope that it will all make sense when I tell you how my time with the intruder continued. I went back home with random groceries I had bought. The note was a little more difficult. I didn't want to throw it away, but I didn't want her to find it again either, so I hid it in my car and proceeded to go inside. Acting as if nothing was different, except that I had left the raincoat in there as well. The first thing I noticed when walking back inside was the painting. It certainly was a real eye-catcher, but that wasn't the reason for it. Something about it was different. I walked up close and realized what it was, though I still can't say for sure how I even noticed all the way back from the door. My eyesight isn't exactly perfect, but I knew that something was off, despite all the other things that were already weird about this painting. Now the creepy Nick suddenly had a nose. Still no mouth. Again, this wasn't some cartoonish nose, no, it looked eerily realistic. Something she shouldn't have been able to draw in the 30 minutes that I was gone. And the paint wasn't wet either. I threw the painting in my car where the raincoat and note were, making sure the key was hidden. To my surprise, however, Evelyn didn't mention that it was gone once. Would you ever want to go back to that place? I asked her during dinner. She hadn't said much since I came back, and I didn't either because I wasn't really sure what to say. What place? You know. The one where you were before you came back. She shrugged. It is awfully nice there, but it gets a bit boring, doesn't it? Only staring at the sky all day. I nodded. I agree. How come you stayed there for so long then? Wasn't there a way to get out? She looked at me as if she was thinking really carefully about what to say next. There was. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, right? She hissed back. It just took some time. Right. Sorry, I said, feeling a little guilty for interrogating her. I wasn't a therapist or a detective, but I only had two options: find out for myself what happened or send her away, and the latter just didn't seem right to me. I needed her to be here with me. In no way did I actually believe that Evelyn was dangerous, even if she did scare the shit out of me from time to time since she was back. She wouldn't actually hurt me though. Did you draw some more? I changed the subject. Now the annoyance vanished from her eyes and she nodded excitedly. Oh, I really do love drawing, Nick. You know, it's like being back at home without all the negative aspects. Home? This is your home, Ev. Yeah. I mean the other home, she said as if it was the most obvious thing to say. Fucking hell, you're not making things easy for me. Nobody asked you to do anything, Nick. You don't need to be shitty about it. If you don't like the way I am, you can fucking leave. Wow, was all I could say. Probably for the first time she was back, Evelyn sounded a little normal. She took a spoonful of soup and then proceeded, having regulated processes for things I'm not used to, helps me. Okay? I'm not crazy. I nodded, feeling somewhat sympathetic but not completely. If it hadn't been for that damn note I would have been nicer, but I knew that this girl wasn't my girlfriend. At least not all of her. Hell yeah, you need to get used to things. Because you're probably not human, was what I really wanted to say but didn't. I'm going to draw some more after dinner. Do you want to draw as well? You seem a little anxious, dear. I stayed quiet for a moment. There were no steps when it came to drawing, but I still wasn't sure if it was a good idea. No thanks, you go ahead. When Evelyn wasn't sure at first if she wanted to sleep in one bed with me, now I was the one who wanted some distance, but at the same time, I didn't want her to know. Some might wonder why I was even staying in a house with someone I found so unpredictable, but at the core of my heart, I knew this one wouldn't hurt me because somewhere inside was my own Evelyn. And my gut was pretty clear on staying here with her. You got to listen to your gut, right? Anyway, I told her I was feeling a little unwell and would sleep on the sofa so I wouldn't accidentally infect her. She was fine with that. She actually didn't question it. All she asked was if I needed something. Do you want to join me for my bedtime routine though? She asked, and I immediately declined. Feeling too weak for that. She understood, but the disappointment was drawn to her face. How about I just watch you instead? I think I have enough energy for that. Look, maybe I was reading too much into what I read on that note. Maybe she did write the things in an unclear state. Like when you are about to fall asleep and mumble nonsense. She was pretty exhausted from all the drawing. Maybe. Or maybe there was an intruder in her mind and the real Evelyn somehow tricked it. Of course, that sounds more than just a little insane, but even if it was all somehow made up by her mind, then one part of her seemed to believe it. And if it did, maybe I could break her out of this state by breaking her cycle. If I was there for the steps, I could manipulate them. Alrighty. Nighttime routine. Step 1. We light up 3 candles. Not 1, not 2, but 3. What she didn't know was that I had thrown away her box of matches earlier. Shoot, she mumbled. Fire, 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 oh. To my regret, she had extra matches. I should have known that she would be better prepared. Well, I did think about throwing away the candles, but that would have been very obvious, and she probably had spare ones of those hidden away as well. After lighting up the 3 candles and placing them precisely 1 pencil length away from each other, she proceeded to continue with the next one. I moved one of them slightly closer when she was busy getting clothes out of her closet. Step 2. Put on the nightgown. Well, this isn't exactly a gown, but it will do, she joked. I smiled. Nick. Ev, I've seen you naked a billion times. She furrowed her brows and I turned around. Alright, she said after changing. Step 3. Remove all of the makeup and brush the teeth. I need to go to the bathroom for that. Are you coming too? You're not wearing any makeup. She rolled her eyes. But it's a step. Can't you just brush your teeth? I asked. Sure, she said and disappeared into the bathroom. When she came back, her face was wet. I should have gone with her, but I couldn't exactly rip the toothbrush out of her hand. Step 4. Now that the teeth are brushed, the hair follows. I grabbed her hairbrush from the table. Can I? I asked, holding up the hairbrush. Evelyn thought about it for a moment. All right. But precisely 21 brushes. Of course, I lied and made sure to miscount a few times. It all didn't seem enough though. Little mistakes. There had to be something big. Step 5. Turn off the candles and go to bed, she said as she got ready to blow out the candles. Wait. I interrupted her. It's so early and I'm really not tired. Should we watch a movie? I thought you weren't feeling well, dear, she said and raised an eyebrow. Yeah, maybe some distraction will help. And I'd be able to sleep better. She gave me that look. The one that said sorry but not happening. Okay. I moved a step closer. Things had been so weird between us, she needed to know that she could still trust me. I expected her to take a step back but she didn't. Instead, she came closer too and slung her arms around my waist. Maybe messing with her steps, a little did help. She seemed more normal again. So, I tried to go just a tiny bit further and moved my neck down a little. She was still not pulling away, so I gently touched the left side of her neck. Instead of moving back, she came closer. And then I missed her. Again, something we hadn't done in quite a while. She pulled back but smiled, and suddenly I had a new idea. How about we draw a little? Together? That's when her eyes lit up. The bedtime routine was interrupted. I really need to go to bed. But all right. Just for a little bit. For a minute I really thought things were looking better. Things were feeling normal. Until I saw it. I went downstairs to grab some more empty canvases that I had left in the living room. Evelyn had used all the ones upstairs already. And there it was, hanging back in our living room. That goddamn painting. I immediately checked my pocket. The key for the car was still in there. I hadn't taken the pants off and Evelyn hadn't been close enough to take them until a few minutes ago. Except if she somehow tricked me, but even then, I don't remember her leaving the house. She went right upstairs to draw and didn't come down the entire time. And I had the key during that time. I checked my pocket several times because I was already feeling paranoid as fuck. I grabbed the damn thing and ran back upstairs, to the office room where Evelyn was already preparing the paint. There is no way in hell that this could have just shown up in here again. I let the painting fall to the ground. Did you somehow break into my car? I shouted, expecting her to show some distressed reaction. I for one was trembling with anger and fear. She shook her head, completely numb. I don't know how that happened. Maybe you brought it here? She asked. I think I would remember if fuck it. Never mind. I grabbed the biggest brush I could find and slammed it into dark paint. Then I drew over the little figure that now looked exactly like me, except with eyes that would follow you into your nightmares. With hands that showed every vein I had and hair in the exact shade as mine. In a matter of seconds, he was nothing but a black stain, but I didn't stop there. I painted over the entire canvas. When that was done, I grabbed a pair of scissors and slammed them right in the middle of the canvas where I believed the image of me had been before I destroyed it. Evelyn stood still and watched me the entire time. At first, I thought she looked sad or confused maybe, but then I realized the look on her face was one that I had gotten pretty good at myself. Concern. My heart was still racing and I was breathing rapidly. My arms were full of black paint, the scissors still tight in my hand. Sweetie. You don't seem very fine, she finally said. She sounded nice. She sounded like herself. No, I'm not fine. You left, Evelyn. You went to some horrible place and you're trying to tell me it was nice. If it really was so great, then why didn't you call? Why didn't you tell me to come pick you up? Why didn't you ask me to come with you? I tried to control my voice but I couldn't. With every word I got louder and louder. Evelyn avoided my eyes. She looked down and I realized that she tried to hide her face because of the tears that were now rolling down her cheek. This was the first time she cried since she was back. I almost expected her to somehow apologize. To tell me that she left because she wanted to leave me, but then she said the last thing I was expecting. Nick, do you want me to show you where I was? Play-Doh grass, green timbered hills, each one just a little taller than the next, and a lake filled with crystal clear water. With all my heart I hoped that this place didn't exist. I hoped that Evelyn would take me somewhere so vile and horrible that every fiber of my body would simply scream for us to get away. I never wanted to imagine this poor girl going through hell, I didn't want to imagine her going through something so traumatic that she changed her entire personality. Of course, in my heart, I didn't want that, but my brain needed to understand. And no part of me could ever understand how she had been at the most beautiful place I had ever seen in my life, because it had to mean something far more horrifying than a regular mind could even understand or fight. We were standing on a road, not far from where we lived, I suppose. We drove for 2 hours maybe, I can't say for sure. I had lost most sense of time. Well, I drove. She gave directions. We left at noon. Evelyn had written a list for grocery items, food, and drinks for the road. She was so eager after I accepted visiting the place with her that she wrote it last night. Even after already breaking the steps of her nighttime routine. Highly irregular. In the morning she offered to go and buy them together, but I insisted that I would be faster on my own. This way we could go to the perfect place even sooner. I didn't tell her that I took no coat, no umbrella, and certainly didn't use any damn coins. She believed I did exactly as she told me and not only listened to half of her instructions. The groceries were in my backpack, together with my phone that sent my current location to a handful of friends that I could trust. Although I once believed that the girl I left with was the one I could trust the most. Now she was the one who scared me more than any other person ever before. And still, I decided to go with her. To the place she was drawing. The place that changed her. We stood at that empty road looking down at the fields for what felt like an eternity. Not saying one word. Evelyn was smiling and I felt the knot tighten inside of me. Isn't it simply marvelous? Evelyn finally asked. I swallowed. So where did you stay? Where did you sleep? All I see is emptiness. You can look but I can't show you. What do you mean? I asked. Evelyn glanced at me, her face a mixture of anticipation and worry. I can't go back, she whispered. What the fuck? Didn't we come here so you could show me what happened to you? Looking at fucking grass isn't exactly helping our situation, Ev. You've gotten meaner in these past days, she mumbled, and I agreed. I've found it harder to control my emotions. So what now? I asked. You can go look. I think if you do, you will understand. It will all make sense again. I promise, Nick. This beautiful landscape felt suffocating from the outside, but I somehow understood what Evelyn meant. It was pulling me in with its beauty and peaceful nature. It almost seemed as if everything that was on the outside just felt dirty and wrong. That's what was scaring me. If I go there, will I be stuck for weeks, like you were? No, because I will be right here waiting for you. I will make sure we bring you home. Well, it wasn't an easy choice because, on one hand, this place was not scary. It was the middle of the day and I saw no other souls out there that would be able to hurt me. If this was just a regular place, then maybe I needed to get used to the idea that it was out of my hands to help Evelyn. Maybe I needed that kind of closure, maybe we both did. Besides, I had my phone with me and a backpack full of supplies. I would be fine looking at some fields and hills. Maybe I'd stay away from the lake, just to be safe. It's just that when something seems so easy and fine, then there has to be an issue with it. You'll be here when I come back? I asked. She nodded. One more thing. Nick, this might not come as a surprise to you, but there are steps before going in. You're fucking kidding me, I laughed. You have to follow them. I crossed my arms and waited for her to tell me which godforsaken steps she had come up with now. Alright. Step 1. I have to stay here. You have to go alone. Yeah, you already told me. Yes. Step 2. You must go inside one step at a time and leave any extra items on the road, she said as she pointed at the backpack. Right. Step 3. There is no sun inside, but you need to be back before sunset here. That one's not easy. What if I mess up a rule? She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes were piercing through mine. That familiar look. The one that the other version of me had given me on the painting that I destroyed. Not that destroying it helped one bit, it was back in the living room the following morning. Another reason why I had to see this hell for myself. She looked at me with eyes that didn't belong to the woman I loved. You're not Evelyn, I finally said. This was the first time I said those words out loud. This was the first time I said those words out loud. I expected her to laugh or question me, but she didn't. She kept staring. I got a step closer to the imposter and one more until I was standing right above her, not breaking eye contact. What did you do to her? I hissed. My heart was racing, a sudden rush of adrenaline giving me both confidence and anxiety. Evelyn grinned. If you want to see your girlfriend, follow the rules I just gave you and walk over. She emphasized the part with the rules. We were close. Close to the edge. Don't ask me why I did the following. Don't ask me what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't what happened next. I suppose I stopped thinking for a second, or maybe I was finally thinking clearly for once, because at that moment it seemed so incredibly logical. I grabbed Evelyn, or rather her shell inhabited by some sick monster. I grabbed her and with all my strength I pushed both of us to the other side, into the grass. It's hard to describe the feeling of what happened next. A few seconds of the most horrific migraine you could imagine. For a moment it felt as if glass shattered and splintered inside of my mind and pieces were stuck everywhere. I heard static, loud at first but slowly getting weaker. I had closed my eyes, and when I opened them the sharpest light was what I saw, radiating from the sky. It was light as in the middle of the day, but there was no sun. Just like she said. Evelyn. I hadn't realized that I wasn't touching her anymore. She had gotten up. I tried to jump on my feet, at first ignoring my strange surroundings, but I couldn't get up just yet. I thought she would run right over the edge back to the road. I could still see it in front of us, even if it felt as if there was a light filter hanging over the edge to the other side. She didn't though. No, she kneeled down, staring at me as if I had just murdered her entire family, then she grabbed my face and pierced her nails inside my flesh. She removed her hand and looked at the blood on it. She grinned from one ear to the other, but it wasn't a happy or triumphant one. It was a bloodthirsty grin. You're gonna regret this, you bastard. Then she got back up and ran. At those first moments on that field, I could hardly do anything. My head felt as if a swarm of bees was going to war inside. My cheek was bloody, but I felt no pain there. At least Evelyn had left the backpack. As I finally got a little clearer in my head, I grabbed my phone. No signal. However, I did have a few messages that were sent before. All saying how the connection broke down. My friends couldn't follow the GPS to where I was. We'd disappeared from the landscape. Well, fuck, I thought. Now there were two pathways in front of me. Well, one of them quite literally. There was a pathway on that field I was standing on, leading God knows where. A pathway I hadn't seen from the outside. And then there was the possibility of leaving if that was possible. I didn't know if that would do any good, but I had a feeling that as soon as I might leave, Evelyn would be stuck here for good and I wouldn't be able to find her again. The real Evelyn, that is. So, I got on my feet, which were shaky at first but became steadier by the second, and I started hiking up the path. With everything odd and strange happening, I didn't feel frightened at that moment. No, as I mentioned. This place was far more peaceful than the outside. It felt welcoming. Familiar because I had looked at it in her drawings for days. With every step I took, the landscape seemed to change. The vast fields that seemed endless at first were now leading up to something. Towards a part of the lake, as it appears there was more than one. I followed the pathway and was led to a big lake just in front of a hill. There didn't seem anything but nature at first until I got close enough. Close enough to see the one thing I certainly did not expect at this place. A house. It had a small frame and was painted in a lemony yellow. It was fresh, I could smell the paint even from this distance. The door was a rusty red, the windows small, and a bike was leaning on the wall. This house was an exact replica of the one we lived in. Except it was crooked and unfinished. Like a cardboard version of our home. I swallowed, standing on this path, unsure whether I should take one more step or run for my life. I certainly should have run, but somehow my feet wouldn't listen, and so I approached the wrong, crooked home. Only as I was standing in front of the house, not able to hide behind anything, I wondered what in the hell I was thinking. There was nothing around me. This was definitely the place the wrong Evelyn ran towards, and after what she'd done to my face, I didn't want to know what else she might be capable of. I wondered about the rules she told me about. Was the one about the sunset correct? If so, what time was it now? The clock on my phone stopped working. I looked to my left and to my right. There seemed to be more buildings on this road, although much further away. Other homes, all a little crooked, all a little wrong. There was a reason the pathway led me to my own, however, and I needed to find out why. I collected all my courage and slowly approached the house. On the left side of the door, there was a hedge. I climbed down next to it, took a deep breath, and got ready to have a peek inside. If she saw me, this could be my end. My heart was racing so fast that all I could hear was the sound of blood rushing through my veins. Completely consumed with fear and anticipation, I was so focused on whatever was inside of this house that I forgot about my surroundings. That's when I felt the touch of a boiling warm hand wrap around my mouth. "Nick," a voice whispered. I grabbed the hand and pulled the person down to the ground with me. Of course, the person was none other than Evelyn. Her eyes were full of panic and she gestured for me to be quiet. Her hands were shaking and she looked completely messed up. Completely different than she had looked before. She was wearing the same clothes, but there was blood on her face, her hair went in all directions and her clothes were ripped. "Nick, you have to be quiet. They are in there," she whispered. Her eyes looked genuinely scared and real. "Evelyn, is this you?" A tear rolled down her cheek and she gave me that half smile that I hadn't seen in weeks. It was me the whole time, but this thing. It infected my mind. To be able to get out with me. "I'll explain, but we need to hide somewhere else." She grabbed my hand and I followed. Another possibly stupid mistake, but despite all the mindfuckery I still knew that this was her. She had that determined look in her eyes that I knew so well. Evelyn found a safe spot, so she said. It was some tree, one that I didn't remember from her paintings. "Ev, I don't understand. What the hell is going on?" She sighed. "I don't know how to explain. There probably is no normal way to do that. I was here for weeks that felt like years and I still don't understand it entirely. They somehow infest your mind, and when they dig deep enough, at a place where you can't even feel them anymore, they take over." "Who are they?" "The things. I don't know what to call them. When you messed up her routines, you somehow broke her power over me. Little by little. More and more. She wasn't supposed to come back here. It was dangerous. When latched onto a person entirely, they can take their soul with them and slowly replace yours with their own. I'm pretty sure she only wanted to make sure you got in. When you threw us, over the edge, she couldn't latch on for much longer." "So, you're free?" She looked at me with fear in her eyes. "For now. She's in the house. In her own copy of a body. Just like yours. We need to make sure." "What do you mean? Just like mine?" "Nick. It wasn't just me who got infected. When we were here last time." Now, this was getting ridiculous. I had never come to this weird-ass place in my entire life, and this whole story that Evelyn was telling me now seemed more bonkers than everything she'd done so far. But then again, I did see that house just now. I just didn't get it. "But that's impossible. No, you went to the gym and then you simply didn't come back." Evelyn shook her head. "No, we went together. We were there for at least one day. We had a picnic and it was so nice there that we decided to stay for as long as we could. Of course, that was them manipulating our minds into thinking that. So they had time to melt into one with us. But then you left." I swallowed. Those words were the hardest to hear. "I left you?" I whispered. She took my hand and I finally remembered how strong Evelyn was. The real one. "I don't think you did it voluntarily. You weren't entirely in charge of your mind. More so than me, I think, but still not completely. I can't say for sure how that worked because I had her thoughts melted with mine, but I don't know what it looked like for you. I suppose your memory was more affected though." She closed her eyes for a moment and I could feel her pain. "They took my will. I had no control, and with every step they made me do, they chewed a bigger part of me. When you were gone, I was in that house which kept growing each day, and with each day that other shell grew too." I wanted to ask what she meant by that, but I was incredibly hard to follow already. "What about the paintings? Do you remember that?" She nodded. "Some of it was me. Some of it was the thing. I tried to help you remember. It tried to make you go back so that they could switch you out for good. The painting of you in the field. That really was you, the part you left here. I think she tried to lure you in to exchange you with a copy they were creating, or make you become one. They are inside here, collecting their strengths now. Growing." While I didn't want to believe what she was saying, at the same time I didn't have to, if that makes any sense. Remember what I said about Evelyn's autopilot not being entirely in sync? I believe mine did even more without my knowledge. But I still had to be sure. I had to see that we were not both losing our minds simultaneously. So I walked back to the house. I walked up the pathway leading me directly towards the door. Alone. And then I knocked. 3 times, as Evelyn told me. I didn't know if I could trust her or if this was even the real one, but that is what I did. I knocked on the door, which wasn't locked. I don't believe it even had a lock. The door that felt as if it was made out of pasteboard opened wide as my fist hit against it. I knew that I couldn't exactly expect something nice in front of me, but the look of those creatures brought up the bile inside my stomach. Evelyn was right. The thing had separated from her, but she had grown while inside of her. Grown to be an almost identical copy. Almost. It was not fed enough, consisted of more bones than flesh and skin with holes in it. Her hair appeared glued on, the eye stones instead of irises. There you are, she called out in glee with a voice that was eerily similar to the real one. There you are, the other one croaked. The one that looked like me with a nose and mouth that were still growing. I swallowed. I was not ready for this. But I had to be, there was no other option. I had to make sure that they would stay right where they were. Of course, the copy of me was already trying to get on its feet to move closer to me. Hurry up, I thought to myself. What are you doing? The fake Evelyn shouted. What is this smell? She looked at me, but I'm not the one she was talking to. It was my Evelyn who came in from the back while they were distracted, to pour out the gasoline before they noticed. She lit up a match and threw it in the liquid. Close the door, she shouted before starting to run. I slammed the pasteboard door shut and prayed it wouldn't break. One of them was scratching the door from the inside, making noises that no human could ever be capable of. Evelyn, I shouted, praying even more that she had made it out through the door in the back. The house burned down in a matter of minutes. I suppose that happens when you build a house out of cardboard. It burned down, our parasites with it. And the real Evelyn and I ran outside, back to our world, not looking back once at the wonderful scenery. You see, I'd trusted this Evelyn. I knew it was her, the one that wrote that coded grocery list the other day. Because last night she wrote another one when she was in charge of the mind a little more. A list that instructed me to buy gasoline and matches while she told me we needed food and drinks. When she did that, something just clicked. I realized there was still one part inside of her that I could trust, and I could just tell it was this one. Since we've gotten back, and I still can't believe we did, I have had a hard time adjusting. I don't follow any crazy steps, of course. I just live my regular life as well as I can remember. Evelyn and I even burned down the raincoats. The smell of burning plastic really is horrendous, but not as bad as our second bodies smelled before they turned to ash. Evelyn suggested we burn the paintings as well. I thought about it. But I kind of like seeing the painting that once had my imposter on it but now is only a big field. It even got me in the mood to start drawing. Drawing a place that shouldn't exist with Play-Doh grass, green timbered hills, a crystal clear lake, and pathways with many different homes that aren't burning yet.
Please like our video and subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss out any of our future videos. Thank you for your support. This is RedditJoe channel, your everyday Reddit.